When the cargo ship Meridian Dawn sent out its final distress call 200 miles off the coast of Malta, everyone assumed Jamaica Eren would be filing paperwork while the real operatives handled the crisis. They had no idea that the quiet communications analyst had completed Navy SEAL training in 3 different countries, or that she'd been preparing for exactly this moment for 8 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Mediterranean sun cast long shadows across the deck of the research vessel Aurora's pride as Jamaica Eren adjusted her headset and settled into another routine morning of monitoring communication frequencies. At 28, she had spent the last 8 years aboard various maritime research and security vessels, always in the same role: communications analyst, data processor, the person who listened while others acted. To her colleagues, Jamaica was the soft-spoken European woman with dark hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, who spoke 4 languages fluently and could decode encrypted transmissions faster than anyone in the fleet. She was reliable, competent, and completely unremarkable. They saw someone who preferred computers to combat, analysis to action. What they didn't see was the woman who woke up at 0400 every morning to run the ship's perimeter deck 50 times. They didn't notice that her language studies included tactical combat terminology in Russian, Arabic, and Mandarin. They had no idea that the equipment maintenance she volunteered for during port stops was actually advanced weapons training with contacts she'd cultivated across 3 continents. Jamaica had learned early in her career that revealing her true capabilities was a mistake. Fresh out of her classified Navy SEAL program, a joint European initiative so secretive that even mentioning it could end careers, she'd made the error of suggesting tactical improvements during her first assignment. The response had been swift and humiliating: questions about her overreach, concerns about her attitude, and ultimately a reputation as someone who didn't understand her place. So she'd adapted. She became the perfect communications analyst, hiding her advanced combat training behind a facade of technical expertise. She studied her colleagues' missions obsessively, memorizing vessel layouts, weather patterns, and threat assessments, not because anyone asked her to, but because she knew that preparation was the difference between success and catastrophe. Her quarters were Spartanly efficient, but hidden beneath regulation items was equipment that would have raised eyebrows if discovered. Tactical gear acquired during shore leaves, encryption devices obtained through channels that officially didn't exist, and detailed intelligence reports on maritime threats that she compiled using sources her colleagues didn't know she had. Irony wasn't lost on her. She'd trained alongside operators who were now leading high-profile missions across the globe, while she sat in communication centers processing their reports. Her instructors had praised her strategic thinking, her ability to remain calm under extreme pressure, her innovative approaches to impossible problems. But in the real world, those same qualities were seen as inappropriate ambition in someone whose job was to monitor radio frequencies. Captain Henrik Volkov commanded the Aurora's pride with the kind of old-school maritime authority that left little room for input from junior personnel. To him, Jamaica was a useful tool, someone who could translate intercepted communications and maintain the ship's complex data systems. He'd never asked about her background beyond her official credentials, and she'd never volunteered the information. The same was true for Chief Operations Officer Marcus Chun, who coordinated the ship's security protocols. He appreciated Jamaica's technical skills but saw her as support personnel, someone who enabled the real work without participating in it. When training exercises were conducted, she was assigned to monitor communications, while others practiced boarding procedures and threat response. Even Dr. Ilana Vasquez, the mission director who oversaw their research operations, viewed Jamaica through the narrow lens of her official role. During mission briefings, Jamaica's insights about potential security concerns were politely noted and quickly dismissed in favor of perspectives from the designated security team. What none of them realized was that Jamaica had been preparing for a mission that hadn't been assigned yet. Every night after her shift ended, she studied intelligence reports from maritime security databases she wasn't supposed to have access to. She tracked piracy patterns, analyzed terrorist cell movements, and identified potential threats to civilian vessels operating in the Mediterranean. Her preparation wasn't random or obsessive. It was methodical and purposeful. She'd identified 17 different scenarios where their current security protocols would fail catastrophically, and she'd developed contingency plans for each one. Plans that involved capabilities her colleagues didn't know she possessed. Using equipment they didn't know she could operate. The morning sun climbed higher as Jamaica reviewed the overnight communication logs, her fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard, while her mind processed intelligence updates from sources across the region. To anyone watching, she looked like exactly what she appeared to be, a competent analyst doing routine work, but Jamaica knew that routine was about to end. The intelligence chatter she'd been monitoring for weeks suggested that something significant was building in their operational area. Pirates had been consolidating their resources, and there were indications of a coordinated operation targeting research vessels like theirs. She'd prepared a detailed threat assessment, complete with recommended security upgrades and tactical countermeasures. But experience had taught her that sharing such analysis would only raise questions about how she'd obtained the information and why she'd taken initiative beyond her assigned responsibilities. So she waited, her fingers steady on the keyboard, her mind calculating probabilities and preparing for the moment when preparation would meet opportunity. She'd spent 8 years being underestimated, 8 years hiding capabilities that could save lives. Today felt different. Today felt like the day that would change everything. The morning briefing in the Aurora's Pride's main conference room followed its predictable rhythm, with Jamaica occupying her usual spot near the back corner, notepad ready and expectations low. Captain Volkov stood at the head of the table, his weathered face serious as he addressed the assembled department heads and senior staff. Intelligence reports indicate increased piracy activity in our operational sector, Volkov announced, his Estonian accent adding gravity to words that made Jamaica's pulse quicken. She'd been tracking the same intelligence for weeks, had compiled detailed analysis of the threat patterns, but knew better than to speak unless directly asked. Chief Chun leaned forward, his expression skeptical. How credible are these reports? We've had false alarms before. Jamaica could have answered that question with precision. She'd verified the intelligence through 3 independent sources and cross-referenced it with historical piracy data going back 5 years. Instead, she remained silent as Volkov consulted notes that contained a fraction of the information she'd already processed. Credible enough to warrant increased vigilance, Volkov replied. I want security protocols reviewed and updated. Chun, coordinate with your team on revised watch schedules. Vasquez, ensure all research equipment is properly secured. The conversation continued around Jamaica as if she were invisible furniture. When communications protocols were discussed, they talked about her capabilities rather than to her, making decisions about her equipment and procedures without seeking her input. She'd learned years ago that offering suggestions during these meetings was counterproductive. It only reinforced perceptions that she didn't understand her place in the hierarchy. After the briefing, Jamaica returned to her communications station, a compact but sophisticated setup that served as the ship's nerve center for external contact. Her official duties involved monitoring maritime traffic, maintaining contact with port authorities, and processing routine administrative communications. What her colleagues didn't realize was that she'd quietly enhanced the system's capabilities, adding equipment and software that extended their intelligence gathering range far beyond standard parameters. As she worked through the morning's routine tasks, Conversations from nearby workstations reinforced the familiar pattern of dismissal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Good thing we've got someone reliable handling communications. She heard operations specialist Sarah Lindquist comment to her colleague, "I wouldn't want someone with big ideas trying to play spy when what we need is steady technical support." The comment stung not because it was malicious. Sarah genuinely meant it as a compliment, but because it highlighted how completely Jamaica's true capabilities were misunderstood. She'd trained in intelligence analysis at facilities where Sarah couldn't gain clearance to enter, but that training had to remain invisible to avoid being labeled as someone with inappropriate ambitions. During the lunch break, Jamaica found herself in the galley with several crew members discussing the morning's security briefing. The conversation revealed just how limited their understanding of the actual threat was. They spoke about piracy in abstract terms, as if it were a distant possibility rather than an immediate concern. "Pirates go after cargo ships and oil tankers," declared Engineering Officer Tom Brennan, his Irish accent confident despite his limited knowledge of maritime security. "Why would they bother with a research vessel? We've got nothing worth stealing." Jamaica could have explained that modern piracy operations often targeted research vessels, specifically because they carried valuable scientific equipment and operated in predictable patterns with minimal security. She could have detailed the specific tactics being employed by the consortium of criminal organizations operating in their area. Instead, she listened while Brennan and others reassured themselves with misconceptions that could get them killed. The afternoon brought a routine equipment inspection, and Jamaica used the opportunity to check the defensive capabilities that officially didn't exist. Hidden among legitimate communication gear were detection systems that could identify approaching vessels long before they appeared on standard radar. She'd installed and maintained this equipment during off-duty hours, using skills and resources that her colleagues couldn't imagine her possessing. Her inspection revealed what she'd suspected. Their official security measures were inadequate for the threats they faced. The ship's defensive protocols assumed threats would be obvious and straightforward, but Jamaica's intelligence indicated they were dealing with sophisticated operators who specialized in avoiding conventional detection methods. As evening approached, Jamaica completed her shift by filing routine reports that contained none of the critical intelligence she'd gathered throughout the day. Her official communications logs showed standard traffic monitoring and administrative processing. The real intelligence, detailed analysis of the growing threat in their operational area, remained in files that only she could access. Her quarters that night felt smaller than usual as she reviewed the intelligence that painted an increasingly concerning picture. The Piracy Consortium had been studying research vessels for months, developing specific tactics for operations like the one the Aurora's Pride was conducting. They knew the ship's schedule, its route, and its security capabilities. What they didn't know was that Jamaica Eren was aboard, carrying 8 years of hidden preparation and capabilities that could turn their planned operation into a catastrophic failure. But for that preparation to matter, she needed an opportunity to use it. And opportunities, she'd learned, rarely came to those who waited for permission. The ship settled into its nighttime routine around her, crew members secure in their belief that their roles and capabilities were clearly defined. Jamaica stared out at the Mediterranean darkness and wondered how many more nights she'd spend hiding her true nature, while threats gathered just beyond the horizon. Tomorrow would bring another day of monitoring communications, while others made security decisions. Another day of being seen as competent but limited, reliable but not resourceful. Another day of preparation without opportunity, unless something changed the equation entirely. She had no way of knowing that change was already heading toward them at 30 knots, carrying armed operators who'd made the mistake of assuming the Aurora's Pride was just another soft target crewed by academics and technicians. They had no idea that one of those technicians had spent 8 years preparing for exactly this encounter. The crisis simulation began at 0800 sharp, designed by Chief Chun to test the crew's response to a hypothetical piracy threat. Jamaica watched from her communication station as the exercise unfolded, her trained eye immediately identifying critical flaws in their defensive strategy that would prove fatal in a real encounter. Hostile vessel approaching from bearing 180, announced radar operator Kin Nakamura, reading from the pre-scripted scenario. Distance, 2 nautical miles in closing. Captain Volkov stepped to the center of the bridge, his command presence filling the space as he began issuing orders. All hands to security stations. Chun, implement Defensive Protocol 7. Lindquist, secure all research equipment. Jamaica listened to the unfolding response with growing concern. Protocol 7 assumed a single vessel approach with conventional tactics, exactly the kind of predictable thinking that modern piracy syndicates exploited. Through her enhanced monitoring systems, she'd tracked actual operations that used coordinated multi-vessel approaches, electronic warfare capabilities, and insider intelligence that made traditional defensive measures obsolete. "Sir," she interjected. During a brief pause in communications traffic, the approaching pattern suggests, Martinez, maintain communication protocols. Chun cut her off without looking up from his tactical display. Monitor maritime frequencies for distress calls and coordinate with port authorities as needed. She fell silent, but continued observing as the exercise revealed systematic vulnerabilities. Their response assumed the attackers would announce themselves clearly and approach directly. They positioned defensive personnel where textbook procedures suggested, not where actual intelligence indicated threats would materialize. Most critically, they relied on communication systems that sophisticated pirates had demonstrated the ability to compromise or intercept. When sonar technician Pavel Volkov, the captain's nephew, reported contact signatures that didn't match the actual threat profile Jamaica had been tracking, she realized the gap between their perception and reality had become dangerous. Pavel was competent at standard sonar operation, but he lacked the advanced training to identify the masked signatures that modern criminal vessels employed. Contact bearing 045, single vessel. Estimated displacement 200 tons. Pavel announced with confidence that made Jamaica wince. The signature he'd identified was exactly the kind of decoy that real operations used to mask their primary assault vessels. Dr. Vasquez, coordinating from the scientific stations, seemed reassured by the straightforward nature of the reported threat. "At least it's just one ship," she commented to her research team. "Pirates aren't usually sophisticated enough for complex operations." Jamaica knew that assessment was dangerously outdated. The consortium operating in their area had demonstrated coordination capabilities that rivaled military operations, using technology and tactics that most commercial vessels couldn't detect, much less counter. She'd documented 17 separate incidents where similar underestimation had led to complete mission failure. As the exercise continued, Jamaica utilized her enhanced systems to run a parallel analysis of what a real threat would look like. Her equipment detected electronic signatures that the ship's standard systems missed, entirely indications of advanced scanning and jamming, capabilities that would be devastating in an actual encounter. The results painted a terrifying picture. While the crew responded to a textbook scenario with textbook procedures, real attackers would have already compromised their communications, identified their defensive positions, and coordinated a multi-vector assault that would overwhelm their conventional responses. When Engineering Officer Brennan reported successful implementation of standard defensive measures, Jamaica wanted to scream. Those measures were designed for threats that no longer existed, against opponents who had adapted far beyond the assumptions underlying their protocols. Exercise complete. Captain Volkov announced after 30 minutes of simulated response. Debrief in Conference Room A at 1000 hours. During the debrief, Jamaica sat in her usual corner as the senior staff reviewed their performance with satisfaction that felt surreal, given the massive gaps she'd observed. Chun praised Pavel's sonar work, Vasquez commended the research teams. Equipment security procedures, and Captain Volkov expressed confidence in their readiness for actual threats. Any questions or observations? Volkov asked as the session concluded. Jamaica raised her hand, her heart pounding as she prepared to voice concerns that would likely be dismissed. Sir, I noticed some communication signatures during the exercise. That suggests our communications equipment is functioning properly. Shun interrupted with a tolerant smile. Thank you for monitoring the frequencies, Eren. It's good to know our technical systems are working as designed. The dismissal was polite, but absolute. Jamaica's observation about sophisticated electronic warfare, signatures intelligence that could save their lives, was reduced to routine confirmation that basic equipment was operational. Around the table, colleagues nodded approvingly at Shun's summary, satisfied that their communications specialist was doing her simple job adequately. After the debrief, Jamaica returned to her station with a growing sense of urgency. The exercise had revealed that their official response capabilities were catastrophically inadequate for the actual threats they faced. Worse, their confidence in those inadequate capabilities made them less likely to adapt when reality proved different from their assumptions. She spent the rest of the morning analyzing the intelligence that painted an increasingly dire picture. The Piracy Consortium had been using exercises like this morning's simulation to study their targets' responses, developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit the predictable nature of conventional defensive protocols. What terrified Jamaica most was realizing that their standard procedures weren't just inadequate, they were exactly what their enemies expected and had prepared to defeat. The crew's competence within their defined roles was undeniable, but those roles were based on assumptions that no longer reflected the reality of maritime threats. As afternoon approached, Jamaica faced a familiar dilemma that had defined her career for 8 years. She possessed knowledge and capabilities that could protect her colleagues, but sharing that information would require revealing sources and skills that officially didn't exist. She could continue hiding her true expertise and watch them prepare inadequately for threats they didn't understand, or she could risk exposure by trying to bridge the gap between their perception and the dangerous reality approaching them. The choice was becoming less theoretical with each intelligence update that suggested the consortium was accelerating their operational timeline. Soon, the gap between competence and perception might be measured in lives rather than just career consequences. The emergency briefing that would change everything began with a routine communication. Intercept at 1347 hours. Jamaica had been monitoring encrypted frequencies when she detected the coded transmission that made her blood run cold. Coordinates matching their exact position, transmitted using protocols she recognized from her classified intelligence on the Piracy Consortium's operations. She immediately began recording and analyzing the communication, her enhanced systems revealing layers of meaning that the ship's standard equipment would never detect. What she discovered sent ice through her veins. A coordinated assault was being planned for their location, involving multiple vessels and sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities. The attack was scheduled for dawn, less than 18 hours away. Jamaica burst into Captain Volkov's ready room without requesting permission, her usual deference abandoned in the face of imminent threat. Sir, we have a critical security situation developing. I've intercepted communications indicating. Eren, Volkov interrupted, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. You're supposed to request meetings through proper channels. I'm reviewing operational reports with Captain. We're going to be attacked at dawn, Jamaica said, her voice urgent but controlled. I've detected coordinated communication between multiple vessels using encrypted protocols that indicate. Volkov's face darkened. You've detected communications outside your assigned monitoring frequencies? Your authorization covers maritime traffic and administrative channels, not intelligence gathering on encrypted transmissions. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jamaica had spent 8 years carefully balancing her need to stay informed with the requirement to remain within her officially defined role. Now, facing the most critical intelligence of her career, she was being questioned for exceeding her authorized scope rather than praised for discovering a vital threat. "Sir, the threat is real and immediate," she pressed, producing the detailed analysis she'd compiled. The communication patterns match known piracy operations, and the coordination indicates capabilities far beyond what our current defensive protocols can handle. Volkov glanced at her analysis without reading it. His attention focused on the chain of command violation rather than the content of her intelligence. "This is precisely the kind of overreach that concerns me, Arn. You're a communications analyst, not an intelligence specialist. These frequencies aren't your responsibility." Within minutes, the ready room filled with senior staff summoned to address what Volkov clearly viewed as a disciplinary issue rather than a security briefing. Chief Chun arrived first, followed by Dr. Vasquez and operations specialist Lindquist. Jamaica found herself facing a tribunal of colleagues who saw her as the problem rather than the solution. Arn has been monitoring unauthorized frequencies and claims to have detected threat communications, Volkov announced, his tone suggesting he'd already reached conclusions about her credibility. "I want to address this misunderstanding of roles and responsibilities before it becomes a larger issue." Chun studied the analysis Jamaica had prepared, his expression shifting from professional interest to skeptical dismissal. "These communication intercepts, how exactly did you obtain them, An? And how do you claim to interpret encrypted transmissions? That would require specialized intelligence training to decode." The question hung in the air like an accusation. Jamaica realized that explaining her capabilities would require revealing the classified training that officially didn't exist, the intelligence sources she wasn't supposed to have access to, and the 8 years of preparation that exceeded her assigned role. Any honest answer would expose the hidden expertise that had become her greatest liability. "I've been studying communication patterns in our operational area," she said carefully, "and I've noticed increased activity that matches profiles of coordinated hostile operations." "Studying communication patterns isn't your job," Lindquist pointed out, her voice carrying the patient tone used to explain obvious concepts to confused subordinates. "Your job is to monitor assigned frequencies and process routine communications. This kind of ... initiative suggests you don't understand your actual responsibilities." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, her scientific background making her focus on methodology rather than authority. "Even if these communications are genuine, Arn, how can you be certain of their meaning? Code interpretation requires specialized training and clearance levels that communications analysts don't possess." Jamaica felt the familiar trap closing around her. Her colleagues were using her official role as evidence that she couldn't possibly possess the expertise she was demonstrating. The very preparation that made her qualified to recognize the threat was being used to disqualify her observations. "I'm certain because I've cross-referenced these patterns with known threat profiles," Jamaica replied, trying to balance honesty with operational security. "The coordination indicators, the timing, the electronic signatures, they all match documented piracy operations that have targeted research vessels." Chun's expression hardened. "Documented where, An? What sources are you accessing that give you information about documented piracy operations? Because your security clearance doesn't include access to intelligence databases." The interrogation continued for 20 minutes, with Jamaica's colleagues systematically dismantling her, Credibility by questioning the sources and methods she couldn't officially explain. Every piece of evidence she presented was countered with challenges about her authorization to obtain it, her qualifications to interpret it, and her understanding of her proper role. Finally, Captain Volkov rendered his verdict with the authority of absolute command. Eren, I appreciate your enthusiasm for contributing beyond your assigned duties. However, communications analysts monitor communications. They don't conduct intelligence analysis or threat assessment. Those functions belong to qualified personnel with appropriate training and clearance. Sir, with respect, Jamaica tried one final time. The threat is real. Whether I'm qualified to detect it or not, we're facing a coordinated assault that our current defensive measures cannot. That's enough, Volkov cut her off. You're confined to routine communication duties only. No more monitoring of unauthorized frequencies, no more intelligence gathering, and no more operational assessments outside your designated responsibilities. If there are legitimate threats, they'll be identified and addressed by qualified personnel through proper channels. As the meeting dissolved, Jamaica remained in her chair, watching her colleagues file out with expressions ranging from concern about her judgment to pity for her obvious confusion about her place in the ship's hierarchy. None of them seemed troubled by the possibility that she might be right about the threat, because none of them could conceive of her possessing the expertise to recognize it. Chief Chun paused at the door, his expression sympathetic but firm. Eren, you're good at your job. Don't complicate things by trying to do jobs you're not trained for. Stay in your lane, and you'll have a successful career. Alone in the ready room, Jamaica stared at her analysis detailed, accurate, and completely dismissed. In 18 hours, everything she'd predicted would begin unfolding, and her colleagues would discover that their qualified personnel and proper channels were catastrophically unprepared for the sophisticated threat approaching them. She had been excluded from the response not because she was wrong, but because she was right in ways that challenged their fundamental assumptions about capability, authority, and expertise. Now she faced the hardest decision of her career: follow orders and watch her colleagues walk into a trap or violate every protocol to save them from their own dangerous confidence. Jamaica returned to her communications station after the devastating briefing, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her headset. The echo of dismissal still rang in her ears, but what followed over the next few hours proved even more painful, overhearing conversations that revealed exactly how her colleagues viewed her and her inappropriate concerns. She was reviewing routine maritime traffic when Chief Chun's voice carried from the nearby tactical planning station, where he was discussing the morning's events with operations specialist Lindquist and Dr. Vasquez. I'm genuinely concerned about Iane, Chun said, his tone carrying the careful professionalism of someone discussing a problematic subordinate. This isn't the first time she's shown signs of overreach. Remember when she submitted that unsolicited analysis of our communication security protocols 6 months ago? Jamaica's chest tightened. That analysis had identified vulnerabilities that could compromise their operations, but she'd presented it as a routine technical assessment rather than the comprehensive security review it actually was. She's always been intense, Lindquist replied, but today felt different. The way she talked about encrypted communications and threat profiles. It's like she thinks she's some kind of intelligence operative instead of a communications tech. Dr. Vasquez's voice carried the analytical tone she used when examining problematic data. The concerning part is how confident she seemed about information she shouldn't have access to. Either she's manufacturing intelligence from limited data, which suggests poor judgment, or she's accessing sources beyond her authorization, which suggests disciplinary issues. Jamaica felt each word like a knife twist. Her colleagues were dissecting her credibility with the same thoroughness they'd apply to a failed experiment. unable to conceive that her confidence might be justified by expertise they didn't know she possessed. The captain was right to shut it down, Chung continued. Communications analysts who think they're qualified for intelligence work become dangerous liabilities. They start seeing threats that aren't there and making recommendations based on incomplete understanding. The conversation moved to speculation about her psychological state, with Lindquist suggesting that Jamaica might be experiencing stress-related paranoia from too much time monitoring potentially threatening communications. Dr. Vasquez proposed that her analytical personality might be leading her to see patterns where none existed. Later that afternoon, Jamaica overheard an even more devastating exchange between Engineering Officer Brennan and sonar technician Pavel near the galley. They were discussing the morning security briefing with the casual dismissiveness that made her stomach churn. "Can you believe Eren trying to play spy today?" Brennan laughed, his Irish accent making the mockery sound almost jovial. "Acting like she'd uncovered some massive conspiracy from her little communication station," Pavel chuckled in response. "My uncle says she's been pushing boundaries for months, always asking questions about operational security, studying ship layouts. During her off hours, it's like she watched too many action movies and thinks she's qualified for special operations. The funny thing is, she probably genuinely believes she's helping," Brennan continued. "But communications people don't have the training to understand real security threats. They monitor routine traffic and process administrative messages. When they start thinking they can do intelligence analysis, they just create confusion and distraction." Jamaica forced herself to continue working while the conversation continued, each word reinforcing the impossible position she found herself in. Her actual qualifications: Navy SEAL training, intelligence analysis certification, 8 years of specialized preparation, were not just unknown but would be dismissed as fantasy if she revealed them. The most painful moment came during the evening shift change, when she overheard radar operator Nakamura briefing her replacement about the day's events. "Watch out for Aeon tonight," Nakamura warned in a stage whisper that Jamaica could hear clearly from her station. "She's been acting paranoid about phantom threats." The captain had to shut down some kind of intelligence fantasy she was pushing. Her replacement, communications specialist Torres, responded with knowing sympathy. "Those technical people sometimes get tunnel vision. They spend so much time with data that they start imagining it means more than it does. My last ship had a sonar tech who convinced himself every fishing boat was a submarine." "Exactly," Nakamura agreed. "Eren's good at her actual job, but she needs to stick to what she knows. When communications analysts start playing intelligence officer, they just create problems for people who are actually qualified to assess threats." The conversation continued with increasingly personal speculation about Jamaica's motivations and mental state. They discussed whether her intensity came from insecurity about her role, whether she was seeking attention through dramatic warnings, or whether she simply didn't understand the difference between her technical skills and actual intelligence capabilities. As night fell, Jamaica found herself isolated not just professionally but personally. Colleagues who had treated her with friendly respect that morning now viewed her as either delusional or dangerously ambitious. Her credibility hadn't just been questioned, it had been systematically destroyed through conversations that painted her expertise as evidence of instability. The worst part was understanding that their dismissal was logical from their perspective. They knew Jamaica as a communications analyst with no apparent background in intelligence or military operations. Her sudden demonstration of sophisticated threat assessment capabilities didn't suggest hidden expertise. It suggested someone who had exceeded her competence and created dangerous fiction from limited data. When Chief Chun stopped by her station during the late watch, his manner was carefully professional, but unmistakably patronizing. "An, I want you to know that your dedication to the mission is appreciated. But part of being a good team member is understanding your role and trusting others to handle responsibilities outside your expertise. "I understand, sir," Jamaica replied, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Good," Chun said with the satisfied tone of someone who believed he'd resolved a personnel issue. "Focus on what you do well, monitoring communications and maintaining our technical systems. Leave the security analysis to people who are trained for it." As Chun walked away, Jamaica stared at her screens displaying the routine maritime traffic that everyone believed represented the full scope of her capabilities. Around her, the ship settled into its nighttime rhythm, crew members confident that they'd addressed a minor personnel issue and could now focus on their actual responsibilities. None of them realized that the paranoid communications analyst they'd dismissed possessed capabilities that could save their lives in the crisis that was now less than 12 hours away. None of them understood that their logical, reasonable dismissal of her warnings was about to become the most dangerous mistake of their careers. Jamaica had spent 8 years hiding her expertise to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation, but she'd discovered that even when lives depended on it, revealing her capabilities only made her colleagues more convinced that she was delusional. Now she faced the ultimate test of that hidden expertise, protecting people who didn't believe she was qualified to protect them. In the privacy of her quarters after the devastating day of dismissal, Jamaica opened a concealed compartment behind her regulation locker that held 8 years of carefully accumulated preparation. To anyone conducting a routine inspection, the space would appear to contain personal items and off-duty clothing. In reality, it housed equipment and intelligence that represented the most comprehensive threat assessment and response capability aboard the Aurora's Pride. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she reviewed the intelligence analysis that her colleagues had dismissed as fantasy. 3 separate communication intercepts confirmed coordinated movement of vessels toward their position. Electronic signature analysis indicated sophisticated jamming equipment that could cripple their conventional communications. Most critically, pattern analysis suggested this wasn't a random piracy attempt, but a specifically planned operation targeting their research mission. Jamaica spread detailed nautical charts across her small desk, overlaying them with threat assessment data she'd compiled using sources that officially didn't exist. The approaching operation showed hallmarks of the Adriatic Syndicate, a criminal organization that specialized in targeting research vessels carrying valuable scientific equipment and data. Their standard operating procedure involved electronic warfare, coordinated multi-vessel assault, and inside intelligence that made conventional defensive measures useless. What made this particular threat assessment terrifying was its precision. The Syndicate had studied the Aurora's Pride specifically, timing their operation to coincide with the ship's current research phase when valuable deep-sea samples and experimental equipment would be aboard. They knew the crew's routine, their defensive capabilities, and their communication protocols. They had planned their assault to exploit every vulnerability that Jamaica had tried unsuccessfully to warn her colleagues about. Her preparation for exactly this scenario had begun 3 years ago when she first detected increased criminal surveillance of research vessels in the Mediterranean. Using vacation time and shore leave, she'd cultivated relationships with intelligence operatives across 4 countries, building a network that provided access to threat information that maritime security services often missed. The tactical gear concealed in her quarters represented months of careful acquisition during port stops. Each piece had been selected for specific operational requirements: waterproof communication equipment that could maintain contact if the ship's systems were compromised, tactical climbing gear for emergency evacuation scenarios, medical supplies for treating injuries under combat conditions, and defensive weapons obtained through channels that required her to never mention where or how she'd acquired them. Jamaica's most valuable asset was intelligence software that she'd developed using programming skills from her classified training. The system could analyze communication patterns, track vessel movements, and identify coordination indicators that conventional maritime security missed entirely. Tonight, that software painted a picture that made her blood run cold: the syndicates. Operation involved 5 vessels approaching from different vectors, using electronic signatures designed to mask their true capabilities. Their plan called for jamming the Aurora's Pride's communications at 0530, followed by coordinated boarding at 0545. The research vessel's crew would wake up to find themselves surrounded, cut off from outside contact, and facing opponents who had studied their defensive capabilities for months. What the syndicate didn't know was that Jamaica Eren had spent 8 years preparing for exactly this scenario, using training and resources that her colleagues couldn't imagine. Her preparation hadn't been theoretical. She'd studied actual piracy operations, analyzed successful defenses, and developed countermeasures specifically designed for the threats that research vessels faced. The most challenging aspect of her preparation had been maintaining operational security while acquiring the capabilities she needed. Every purchase, every contact, every training session had to be conducted in ways that wouldn't raise questions about her official role or background. She'd become expert at hiding advanced capabilities behind a facade of routine technical competence. Her communication equipment could maintain contact with maritime security forces even if the ship's primary systems were compromised. Her tactical gear would allow her to operate effectively if the crew had to abandon ship or conduct emergency evacuation. Most importantly, her intelligence network could provide real-time updates on threat movements that would be crucial for coordinating any response. Jamaica reviewed the emergency protocols she'd developed for different attack scenarios, plans that took into account the crew's actual capabilities rather than their assumptions about maritime threats. Her colleagues were prepared for straightforward piracy attempts by unsophisticated criminals. The syndicate's operation involved electronic warfare, coordinated tactical assault, and inside intelligence that would render conventional defensive measures worse than useless. The irony wasn't lost on her that the same preparation her colleagues had criticized as inappropriate overreach was now the only thing standing between them and catastrophe. Her paranoid threat assessment had identified the exact operation now approaching them. Her unauthorized intelligence gathering had revealed capabilities that could save their lives. Her inappropriate equipment acquisition had provided tools they would desperately need. As she completed her review, Jamaica faced the hardest decision of her career. She could follow orders, maintain her cover, and watch her colleagues walk into a trap that would likely result in casualties, or worse. Or she could violate every protocol, expose 8 years of hidden preparation, and attempt to save people who had made it clear they didn't want her help. The choice was complicated by her understanding of what exposure would mean. Revealing her true capabilities would end her career, possibly result in criminal charges for unauthorized intelligence gathering, and definitely destroy any chance of future covert operations. But keeping her capabilities hidden while her colleagues faced mortal danger violated everything she'd trained for. Jamaica looked at her watch. 2,347 hours. In 5.5 hours, everything she'd predicted would begin unfolding. Her colleagues would discover that their qualified personnel and proper channels were catastrophically unprepared for sophisticated threats. The question was whether she would maintain her cover while they learned that lesson, or whether she would risk everything to prove that preparation mattered more than authority. She had spent 8 years being the perfect communications analyst, hiding capabilities that could save lives to avoid the career damage that came with exceeding her assigned role. Tonight, she would discover whether those 8 years of sacrifice had been preparation for this moment, or whether her hidden expertise would remain hidden while the people she'd sworn to protect paid the price for their dangerous confidence. In conventional thinking, the countdown to crisis had begun, and Jamaica Eren was the only person aboard who knew what was coming and had the capabilities to stop it. The first indication that Jamaica's warnings had been prophetic came at 0523 hours when the ship's primary communication array went silent. She was monitoring overnight traffic when the sophisticated jamming signal hit their systems like a digital sledgehammer, cutting off contact with port authorities, maritime security, and the outside world in seconds. Jamaica's enhanced equipment, hardened against exactly this type of electronic warfare, continued functioning while chaos erupted across the ship. Through her concealed monitoring systems, she could see what her colleagues couldn't. 5 vessels had positioned themselves in a perfect coordination pattern around the Aurora's pride, their electronic signatures matching the Adriatic Syndicate's. Standard assault formation, emergency lighting bathed the communication center in red as automatic systems tried unsuccessfully to re-establish contact through the Syndicate's jamming field. Jamaica watched radar displays that showed only static while her hidden systems tracked the approaching vessels with crystal clarity. They were 12 minutes out and closing fast. Captain Volkov's voice crackled through the ship's internal communication system, his tone carrying the tension of someone facing an unexpected crisis. All hands to emergency stations. We've lost external communications and have multiple contacts approaching. This is not a drill. Jamaica felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that accompanied real-world crisis situations, but unlike her colleagues, she wasn't surprised by what was happening. Every element of the developing situation matched her intelligence analysis exactly, timing, tactics, and technological capabilities that proved the Adriatic Syndicate had studied their target exhaustively. Chief Chun arrived at the communication center within minutes, his expression grim as he surveyed the dead equipment that represented their only link to outside help. Status report. Can you re-establish contact with maritime authorities? Negative, sir, Jamaica replied, maintaining her official role while her hidden systems provided detailed intelligence about the approaching threat. We're facing sophisticated electronic warfare that's designed to isolate us completely. Standard communication protocols won't penetrate this type of jamming. Chun's face darkened as he absorbed implications that Jamaica had tried to warn him about less than 12 hours earlier. How long until you can work around the interference? Jamaica could have explained that conventional equipment would never penetrate the Syndicate's jamming capabilities, that the attackers had specifically designed their electronic warfare to exploit the exact vulnerabilities she'd identified in her dismissed security analysis. Instead, she gave the answer that her official role required. Working with standard equipment, sir, we're completely cut off until the jamming stops. The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as Jamaica's enhanced systems tracked the final approach of vessels her colleagues still couldn't detect. Through her concealed equipment, she monitored communication between the assault teams as they coordinated their boarding operation with military precision. Dr. Vasquez arrived at the communication center with the research team's emergency protocols, her scientific background making her focus on systematic solutions rather than panic. Arn, we need to transmit our research data to the university before what? Chun interrupted sharply. We don't even know what we're facing yet. Jamaica knew exactly what they were facing, a coordinated assault by professionals who had planned this operation for months. The Syndicate's communication indicated they knew the location of valuable research equipment, the crew's defensive capabilities, and the ship's emergency procedures. They weren't facing random pirates, they were facing an organization that had turned research vessel robbery into a sophisticated military operation. Operations Specialist Lindquist rushed into the communication center with radar reports that confirmed Jamaica's worst fears. Sir, we've got at least 3 vessels closing on our position. They appeared out of nowhere when our long-range systems went down. 3 vessels? Jamaica asked, knowing the actual count was 5, but unable to reveal her superior intelligence. without exposing her hidden capabilities. That's what standard radar shows, Lindquist replied grimly. But with the interference, we might be missing contacts. Jamaica bit back the urge to explain that they were missing 2 heavily armed assault boats, specifically designed to avoid conventional detection. Her enhanced systems could track all 5 vessels with precision, but sharing that information would require explanations that would destroy her cover at the worst possible moment. Captain Volkov's voice echoed through the ship as he addressed the crew over internal communications. All personnel, we are facing an apparent piracy attempt by multiple vessels. Implement Emergency Protocol Delta, secure all research equipment, and prepare for possible boarding action. Emergency Protocol Delta represented the ship's standard response to piracy threats, based on assumptions about unsophisticated attackers using predictable tactics. Jamaica watched her colleagues implement procedures that would be catastrophically inadequate for the threat they actually faced. The syndicate's assault boats were now 8 minutes out, approaching in a pattern designed to overwhelm the ship's defensive positions. Their electronic warfare had isolated the Aurora's pride from outside help, and their inside intelligence had provided detailed information about the crew's emergency procedures. In less than 10 minutes, everything Jamaica had predicted would begin unfolding with devastating precision. Through her concealed equipment, she monitored the assault team leaders coordinating their final approach. Their professionalism chilled her. These weren't desperate criminals making opportunistic attacks. They were military-trained operators executing a meticulously planned operation against a target they'd studied for months. "Arn," Chief Chun said, his voice carrying new urgency as the reality of their isolation sank in. "Is there any way to punch through the jamming? Any emergency protocols that might work?" Jamaica looked at the man who had dismissed her warnings 12 hours earlier, who had questioned her qualifications and told her to stay in her lane. Now he was asking for exactly the kind of unconventional solutions that her hidden expertise could provide. "Sir," she said carefully, "standard procedures won't work against this level of electronic warfare. We're facing capabilities that exceed our defensive assumptions." Chun's expression shifted as he began to understand that the threat Jamaica had tried to warn them about was exactly what they now faced. "What kind of capabilities?" "The kind that suggests this isn't a random piracy attempt," Jamaica replied, revealing as much as she dared without exposing her intelligence sources. "This is a planned operation by professionals who have studied our ship specifically." The communication center fell silent except for the static of jammed frequencies and the distant sound of engines growing closer. Jamaica's colleagues finally understood that they were facing exactly the sophisticated threat she'd tried to warn them about. But that understanding came 6 minutes too late to implement effective countermeasures. As the assault boats closed to final approach distance, Jamaica faced the moment she'd been preparing for throughout 8 years of hidden training. Her colleagues had dismissed her expertise when it could have prevented this crisis. Now they needed that same expertise to survive it. The question was whether she would maintain her cover while they faced the consequences of their dangerous confidence, or whether she would risk everything to save people who had made it clear they didn't believe she was qualified to help them. At 0538 hours, with the assault boats 4 minutes from boarding range, Jamaica faced a decision that would define not just her career, but her conscience. Through her concealed monitoring equipment, she watched the final coordination between assault teams who were about to overwhelm her colleagues' inadequate defenses. The moment of choice had arrived with devastating clarity. Captain Volkov's voice crackled through the internal communication system, carrying the strain of someone who realized conventional options had been exhausted. "All hands prepare for imminent boarding action. Secure research data and assume defensive positions per Emergency Protocol Delta." Jamaica knew that Protocol Delta would position the crew exactly where the syndicate expected them, based on intelligence they'd gathered about the ship's standard procedures. Her colleagues were about to walk into positions that had been pre-targeted. by opponents who understood their defensive plans better than they did. Chief Chun stood at the communication center's tactical display, his expression grim as he coordinated a response that Jamaica knew would fail catastrophically. Any chance of getting a distress signal through the jamming? Not with conventional equipment, Jamaica replied, her heart pounding as she reached the point of decision. She could maintain her cover, watch her colleagues implement procedures that would get them killed or captured, and preserve 8 years of careful operational security. Or she could risk everything to save people who had spent the last 12 hours dismissing her as paranoid and unqualified. Through her hidden systems, she monitored the assault team leaders making final preparations for boarding. Their conversation revealed tactical details that confirmed her worst fears. They planned to take control of the ship within minutes, neutralize resistance using non-lethal weapons that would leave the crew alive but helpless, and secure valuable research data before maritime security could respond. "Sir," Jamaica said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do, "I may have options that conventional procedures don't cover." Chun looked up from the tactical display, his expression shifting from desperate hope to skeptical. "Confusion. What kind of options, Arn?" "You're a communications analyst." Jamaica stared at the man who had questioned her qualifications, dismissed her warnings, and told her to stay within her assigned role. Now that same man was asking for unconventional solutions that only her hidden expertise could provide. "Options that require you to trust me," she replied, knowing that the next words would either save her colleagues or destroy her career. "I have communication equipment that can penetrate the jamming, intelligence about the assault team's capabilities, and tactical knowledge that could help us coordinate an effective defense." The communication center fell silent except for the static of jammed frequencies and the approaching sound of high-powered engines. Dr. Vasquez, operations specialist. Lindquist and the assembled crew members stared at Jamaica with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. "Arn," Chun said slowly, "what aren't you telling us about your background?" Jamaica looked around the room at colleagues who had spent months treating her as a competent but limited technical specialist. Revealing her true capabilities would answer questions they'd never thought to ask and expose preparations they'd never imagined she could possess. 8 years ago, I completed Navy SEAL training through a classified European program," she said, her voice carrying the authority that she'd hidden behind technical competence for nearly a decade. "I've maintained intelligence contacts, enhanced equipment, and tactical capabilities specifically for situations like this." The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. Chief Chen's mouth opened slightly as he processed information that recontextualized every interaction they'd had over the past 2 years. Dr. Vasquez stared with the analytical expression she used when encountering data that challenged her fundamental assumptions. "You're a Navy SEAL?" Lindquist asked, her voice carrying disbelief that bordered on accusation. "Why didn't you tell us? Why have you been working as a communications analyst if you have special operations training?" Jamaica felt the familiar pain of explaining decisions that others couldn't understand. "Because special operations personnel who reveal their backgrounds get assigned to special operations roles, and I wanted to work in maritime research. I've spent 8 years maintaining my technical skills while staying operationally ready for exactly this kind of crisis." Through her concealed equipment, she could see the assault boats reaching final approach positions. In 90 seconds, armed teams would begin boarding the Aurora's Pride using tactics designed to overwhelm conventional resistance. Her colleagues had 90 seconds to decide whether they would trust someone they'd dismissed as a paranoid communications analyst. "Sir," Jamaica said, addressing Captain Volkov through the communication system, "I have capabilities that could save this ship and crew, but I need authorization to use them. That means accepting that your communications analyst has been hiding Navy SEAL training for 8 years. Volkov's voice came back immediately. carrying the desperate authority of someone who realized conventional options had failed. If you have capabilities that could help, you're authorized to use them. What do you need? Jamaica moved to her concealed equipment compartment, her hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. I need everyone to understand that the next 20 minutes will involve procedures and equipment that aren't in any manual you've read. I'm going to coordinate a defense using intelligence and capabilities that officially don't exist. As she activated communication systems that her colleagues didn't know she possessed, Jamaica felt the weight of 8 years of hidden preparation crystallizing into action. Her enhanced equipment pierced the syndicate's jamming like it was tissue. Paper. Establishing contact with maritime security forces who had been searching frantically for the missing research vessel. Maritime Security Command. This is research vessel Aurora's pride. Jamaica transmitted, her voice carrying the professional calm of someone who had trained for exactly this scenario. We are under coordinated assault by the Adriatic Syndicate, using electronic warfare and multi-vessel boarding tactics, requesting immediate assistance and tactical coordination. The response came back immediately. Aurora's pride. This is MC Command. We've been tracking jamming in your area but couldn't penetrate it. What's your tactical situation? Jamaica looked around the communication center at colleagues who were staring at her with expressions of shock, admiration, and growing understanding. That their quiet communications analyst had been hiding capabilities they never could have imagined. Command, we have approximately 60 seconds before boarding action begins. I'm coordinating defensive response using enhanced intelligence about enemy capabilities and positioning. We'll transmit tactical data for coordination with your response units. As she began uploading intelligence that her colleagues didn't know she possessed, Jamaica realized that the moment of choice had passed. She'd risked everything to save people who had dismissed her, exposed 8 years of hidden preparation, and transformed herself from overlooked analyst to tactical coordinator. In less than 2 minutes, now she had to prove that her hidden expertise was worth the career she'd just sacrificed to use it. Even with assault boats 60 seconds from boarding, and Jamaica's enhanced communication systems providing real-time intelligence about the coordinated attack, Captain Volkov's response revealed how deeply institutional thinking could override tactical reality. Stand down from that equipment immediately, came Volkov's sharp command through the internal communication system. I don't know what unauthorized systems you're operating, but during a crisis, we follow established protocols and chain of command. Jamaica felt the familiar crushing weight of rejection at the moment when her expertise was most desperately needed. Through her enhanced systems, she could see the assault teams making final preparations for boarding, their tactical communication, revealing professional coordination that would overwhelm the ship's conventional defenses in minutes. Sir, she replied, her voice maintaining professional calm despite the rage building inside her. The established protocols are based on assumptions about unsophisticated threats. The syndicate has planned this operation specifically to exploit our standard defensive procedures. Chief Chun moved toward Jamaica's position, his expression conflicted between desperate need for solutions and institutional requirement to maintain proper authority structures. Regardless of your background, you can't operate unauthorized equipment during an emergency without proper authorization and oversight. The proper authorization comes from the captain, Jamaica replied, uploading tactical intelligence to maritime security forces, while her colleagues debated procedure instead of survival. Captain Volkov, I'm providing real-time intelligence about enemy positions and capabilities to coordination rescue response. This is exactly what my training prepared me for. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scientific background making her focus on methodology rather than authority. Jamaica, how do we know this equipment is reliable? How do we verify that your intelligence is accurate rather than compromised by the same systems that jammed our regular communications? The question revealed the impossible position Jamaica found herself in Her colleagues needed proof of capabilities that could only be demonstrated through use. But using those capabilities required trust they weren't prepared to give someone they'd spent months viewing as a technical specialist with delusions of grandeur. Because my equipment is specifically designed to operate in contested electronic environments, Jamaica explained while coordinating with maritime security forces who were mobilizing response units. The syndicate's jamming effects conventional. Maritime communications, not hardened military systems. Captain Volkov's voice crackled through the communication center with the authority of absolute command. Arn, I'm ordering you to cease operation of unauthorized equipment and return to standard emergency protocols. We don't have time to verify your claims or validate systems that aren't part of our official communication array. Jamaica stared at the tactical display showing assault boats, 30 seconds from boarding, while her captain ordered her to abandon the only systems capable of coordinating an effective defense. 8 years of hidden preparation, intelligence that could save lives, and capabilities that maritime security forces desperately needed, all of it dismissed because it didn't fit within established procedures. Sir, she said, her voice carrying 8 years of frustration with institutional thinking that prioritized procedure over survival. In 30 seconds, armed teams are going to board this ship using tactics they've planned specifically to counter our emergency protocols. My intelligence and coordination with maritime security represent our only chance of avoiding casualties. Operations Specialist Lindquist moved to Jamaica's other side, her expression revealing the impossible conflict between recognizing competence and maintaining institutional order. Jamaica, even if everything you're saying is true, you've been operating outside your assigned role and concealing capabilities from your commanding officers. That raises questions about your reliability and judgment. The accusation hit like a physical blow. Jamaica's reliability was being questioned by colleagues whose lives she was trying to save. Her judgment criticized by people who had dismissed her warnings 12 hours earlier. The very preparation that made her qualified to coordinate their defense was being used as evidence that she couldn't be trusted. Through her enhanced systems, she monitored the assault team leaders making final coordination for boarding action. Their professionalism and tactical sophistication confirmed everything she'd tried to warn her colleagues about. But that warning was now being rejected in favor of procedures that would get people killed. Captain, Jamaica tried one final time. Maritime security forces are coordinating a response based on the intelligence I'm providing. If you order me to cease communication and revert to standard protocols, we'll lose coordination with the only forces that can help us. That's exactly what I'm ordering, Volkov replied with finality that ended the discussion. Emergency protocols exist for a reason. During crisis situations, we don't experiment with unauthorized systems or accept tactical coordination from personnel who have concealed their backgrounds and capabilities. Jamaica looked around the communication center at colleagues who needed her expertise but couldn't accept it, who faced mortal danger but insisted on procedures that would increase rather than reduce that danger. Chief Chun's expression showed genuine regret, but also unwavering commitment to following orders rather than tactical reality. I'm sorry, Arn, Chun said quietly, but the captain's right. We can't operate unauthorized systems during an emergency. Regardless of your background or intentions, please return to standard communication procedures. Jamaica felt the crushing finality of institutional rejection at the moment when lives hung in the balance. Her colleagues would rather face sophisticated attackers with inadequate procedures than accept help from someone who had exceeded her assigned role, even when that excess represented exactly the capabilities they needed. Through her enhanced systems, she watched assault boats reaching boarding positions while her colleagues implemented emergency protocols that the syndicate had studied and planned to exploit. In 15 seconds, everything she'd predicted would begin unfolding with devastating precision. She could follow orders, shut down the systems that could save them, and watch her colleagues discover that proper procedures were no match for improper opponents. Or she could disobey direct orders from her captain, maintain coordination with maritime security forces, and risk court-martial to save people who had made it clear they didn't want her help. The choice was no choice at all. Jamaica had spent 8 years hiding her capabilities to avoid exactly this kind of confrontation, but she'd also spent 8 years preparing for exactly this kind of crisis. She wasn't going to let institutional thinking override survival when lives depended on her hidden expertise. "Sir," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had reached the point of no return, "I'm maintaining communication with maritime security forces. You can court-martial me later if we survive." Jamaica turned back to her. Enhanced systems, ignoring Chief Chun's sharp intake of breath, and Dr. Vasquez's murmur of shock. Around her, colleagues watched in stunned silence as their quiet communications analyst chose tactical effectiveness over institutional obedience. The assault boats were 10 seconds from boarding when Jamaica Eren decided that some things were more important than following orders. Jamaica's hands moved with 8 years of muscle memory as she ignored Captain Volkov's direct orders and activated the full capability of her concealed systems. Through her enhanced equipment, she could see the assault boats reaching boarding positions while her colleagues scrambled to implement emergency protocols that would position them exactly where the Syndicate's tactical plan expected them to be. "Maritime Security Command, this is Aurora's Pride Tactical Coordinator," Jamaica transmitted, her voice carrying the professional calm of someone trained for exactly this scenario. "Assault teams are initiating boarding action in 15 seconds. I'm transmitting real-time positioning data and tactical intelligence for coordination with your response units." Around her, the communication center fell into stunned silence as colleagues who had known her as a quiet, technical specialist watched her transform into a tactical coordinator who clearly possessed capabilities they never could have imagined. Chief Chun stepped toward her position, his expression conflicted between duty to follow the captain's orders and growing recognition that Jamaica's actions might be their only chance of survival. "Arn," Chun said quietly, "the captain ordered you to stand down." "The captain ordered me to follow procedures that will get people killed," Jamaica replied without looking away from her tactical displays. "I'm preventing that from happening." Through her systems, she monitored the assault team leaders making final preparations for coordinated boarding action. Their communication revealed tactical sophistication that confirmed every element of her analysis: electronic warfare to isolate the target, inside intelligence about defensive procedures, and professional coordination designed to overwhelm conventional resistance within minutes. Jamaica's enhanced communication equipment allowed her to coordinate with maritime security forces in ways that the ship's standard systems never could. "Mesquite Command, I'm tracking 5 assault vessels using masked electronic signatures, transmitting precise coordinates and tactical assessment of enemy capabilities." "Aurora's Pride, this is MC Tactical," came the immediate response. "We're mobilizing response units to your position, but we need 20 minutes minimum for arrival. Can you maintain tactical coordination until then?" Jamaica looked around the communication center at colleagues who were staring at her, with expressions ranging from shock to grudging admiration. 20 minutes of coordinating defense against professional assault teams, while maintaining cover for her colleagues who had dismissed her capabilities. Exactly the kind of impossible mission her training had prepared her for. "Mesca Tactical." "Affirmative. I'm coordinating defensive response using enhanced intelligence and tactical capabilities. We'll maintain communication throughout the engagement." Dr. Vasquez moved closer to Jamaica's position, her scientific background making her focus on the tactical displays that showed intelligence capabilities far beyond anything the ship's official systems could provide. "Jamaica, how are you tracking vessels that don't appear on our standard radar?" Enhanced detection systems designed for contested environments. Jamaica replied while uploading tactical data that would guide maritime security forces to their exact position. The equipment I've been maintaining for exactly this scenario. The first assault boat reached the ship's starboard side at 0543, its boarding team moving with military precision that confirmed everything Jamaica had tried to warn her colleagues about. Through her concealed cameras, she watched armed operators deploying electronic countermeasures designed to disable the ship's internal communication systems. "All hands were being boarded," came Captain Volkov's voice through the internal communication system that the assault teams were already working to compromise. "Implement Emergency Protocol Delta immediately." Jamaica activated her tactical communication system, her voice reaching every department through channels the assault teams couldn't detect or jam. "All departments, this is Emergency Tactical Coordination. The boarding teams know our standard procedures and have planned their assault to exploit Protocol Delta. Do not move to assigned defensive positions. I repeat, do not implement standard defensive protocol." Chief Chen's eyes widened as he realized that Jamaica's unauthorized systems were providing capabilities that their official equipment couldn't match. You're countermanding the captain's orders. I'm preventing our people from walking into positions that have been pre-targeted by assault teams who studied our emergency procedures." Jamaica replied, coordinating defensive positions that would surprise attackers expecting conventional response patterns. Through her enhanced systems, she monitored the assault team leaders expressing confusion as the ship's crew failed to move to expected positions. Their tactical plan had assumed predictable defensive arrangements based on intelligence about the ship's standard procedures, but Jamaica's coordination was positioning personnel in ways that disrupted their operational timeline. MC Tactical assault teams are aboard and attempting to secure primary objective areas. Jamaica transmitted while coordinating defensive response through her concealed communication network. "I'm providing real-time intelligence about their movements and tactical adjustments." Operations Specialist Lindquist stared at the tactical displays that revealed Jamaica's comprehensive intelligence capabilities. "How do you know where they are? How are you tracking their movements throughout the ship?" "Enhanced surveillance systems that I've maintained as part of operational security preparation," Jamaica replied, guiding her colleagues away from areas where assault teams were concentrating their efforts. 8 years of preparing for exactly this scenario. The assault team's professional coordination began to falter as they encountered defensive arrangements that didn't match their intelligence about the ship's emergency procedures. Through her monitoring systems, Jamaica could hear their tactical communication revealing growing confusion about unexpected resistance patterns and defensive positions that hadn't appeared in their operational planning. "All departments, maintain current positions and await further tactical coordination." Jamaica broadcast through her concealed network while uploading real-time intelligence to maritime security forces. "Do not attempt to implement standard procedures. The assault teams have studied our emergency protocols and planned their operation to exploit predictable responses." Captain Volkov's voice crackled through the compromised internal communication system, his tone carrying new urgency as he began to understand that conventional procedures were failing against unconventional threats. "Communications, what's our status with outside contact?" "Sir, I'm maintaining coordination with maritime security forces through enhanced systems," Jamaica replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. "Response units are en route with precise tactical intelligence about the assault team's capabilities and positioning." Around her, colleagues who had spent the morning dismissing her as paranoid and unqualified watched in stunned recognition as Jamaica's hidden expertise proved to be exactly what they needed to survive a crisis that conventional thinking couldn't address. The unauthorized action that would end her career as a communications analyst was beginning to save their lives as a tactical coordinator they never knew they had. 6 months after the morning that changed everything, Jamaica Eren stood in the briefing room of the Aurora's Pride as its newly appointed chief security officer, addressing a crew that now understood the difference between official qualifications and actual capabilities. The transformation from dismissed communications analyst to respected tactical coordinator had fundamentally altered not just her role, but the ship's entire approach to maritime security. Intelligence reports indicate increased criminal activity in our operational sector, Jamaica announced, her voice carrying the authority that came from proven expertise rather than a signed title. Unlike 6 months ago, we're prepared for sophisticated threats using enhanced detection capabilities and tactical response protocols. Captain Volkov, who had learned to value competence over convention after nearly losing his ship and crew, nodded approvingly as Jamaica outlined security measures that had been developed through actual operational experience rather than theoretical assumptions. The syndicate operation we defeated has served as a case study for maritime security forces across the Mediterranean. Jamaica continued, gesturing to tactical displays that showed comprehensive intelligence-gathering capabilities. Our successful defense demonstrated that research vessels can maintain effective security without compromising their scientific mission. Chief Chun, now Jamaica's deputy for security operations, smiled as he remembered the morning when he'd questioned her qualifications and told her to focus on routine technical duties. It's remarkable how different our threat assessment looks when it's conducted by someone who actually understands modern maritime criminal capabilities. Dr. Vasquez raised her hand with the scientific curiosity that had helped her adapt quickly to Jamaica's revelation about hidden expertise. Jamaica, has your enhanced intelligence network identified any current threats to our research operations? Nothing immediate, but I'm monitoring 3 separate criminal organizations that have expressed interest in research vessels carrying advanced scientific equipment. Jamaica replied with the professional competence that had always characterized her work, whether managing communications or coordinating tactical operations. We're prepared for capabilities that exceed conventional piracy attempts. The crew's transformation in understanding Jamaica's expertise had been accompanied by broader changes in how they approached security and preparation. Operations Specialist Lindquist had completed advanced threat assessment training, inspired by Jamaica's demonstration that technical specialists could develop capabilities beyond their assigned roles. Engineering Officer Brennan had enhanced his emergency response training after experiencing firsthand how Jamaica's preparation had saved his life during the assault. I never understood how much difference real expertise makes until I was following tactical guidance from someone who actually knew what they were doing, he'd told colleagues during a recent debrief. Even sonar technician Pavel had expanded his qualifications, learning advanced electronic warfare detection techniques that complemented Jamaica's enhanced surveillance systems. When someone with Navy SEAL training tells you that preparation matters more than assumptions, you listen, he'd explained to new crew members. The most significant change was in Captain Volkov's approach to leadership and expertise recognition. His experience with dismissing Jamaica's warnings had taught him that competence often existed in unexpected places, and that institutional thinking could become dangerously rigid when it prevented recognition of actual capabilities. "Arn," Volkov said during the briefing's conclusion, "your security assessment for next month's deep water research operation?" "Comprehensive, sir," Jamaica replied with the confidence that came from 8 years of preparation finally being recognized and utilized. "We've enhanced our detection capabilities, developed flexible response protocols, and established coordination with maritime security forces based on actual operational experience rather than theoretical procedures." As the briefing concluded, Jamaica reflected on the journey from overlooked communications analyst to respected security coordinator. The expertise she'd hidden for 8 years to avoid career Complications had become the foundation for transforming how an entire research vessel approached maritime security. Her colleagues no longer saw her as someone who exceeded her assigned role inappropriately, but as someone whose preparation and capabilities had proven essential when conventional thinking failed. The dismissal and skepticism she'd endured for months had been replaced by respect that was earned through results rather than granted through titles. "Jamaica," Dr. Vasquez said as they left the briefing room, "I wanted to thank you again for what you did during the assault. But more than that, I wanted to apologize for how we dismissed your warnings. We learned that expertise doesn't always come with the credentials we expect." Jamaica smiled, remembering the painful conversations when her capabilities had been questioned and her motivations doubted. The important thing is that everyone survived to learn from the experience. That's what preparation is supposed to accomplish. 6 months later, the Aurora's Pride operated with security capabilities that exceeded most military vessels, guided by someone whose 8 years of hidden expertise had transformed from career liability into organizational strength. Jamaica's journey from overlooked analyst to essential coordinator had proven that competence mattered more than convention when lives hung in the balance. As the ship prepared for its next research mission, Jamaica stood at the communications center that had once represented the limitation of her official role but now served as the command center for comprehensive security operations. Her enhanced systems continued monitoring potential threats while her colleagues pursued scientific discoveries with confidence that they were protected by someone who understood that preparation was the difference between success and catastrophe. The morning sun reflected off the Mediterranean as the Aurora's Pride sailed toward its next mission. Crewed by people who had learned that capability couldn't be judged by official roles, that expertise often existed in unexpected places, and that someone they'd dismissed as too small for important responsibilities had possessed exactly the qualifications needed to save their lives. Jamaica Eren had spent 8 years hiding her true capabilities to pursue the work she loved. Now she could do both, contributing to maritime research while utilizing the expertise that had transformed her from overlooked analyst into the person her colleagues turned to when preparation mattered more than procedure. The transformation was complete, but the mission continued. And Jamaica was exactly where she belonged, prepared for whatever challenges awaited, with colleagues who finally understood that competence came in many forms, and that the quiet specialist in the corner might possess capabilities that could change everything when the situation demanded it. Some days, being too qualified for your official role meant being exactly the right person for the mission that mattered most. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.